Okay, hey everyone. Thanks for joining. John Frechette here. We're just going to get started in probably 2 minutes. We'll give people a couple minutes to join. Okay. All right. I think we can kick off now. Really appreciate everyone joining. My name is John Frechette. I am the CEO of Mora. I think most of the people attending, we probably talked to one-on-one, so hopefully you've got a good understanding of our team and of our product. Obviously, the purpose of this webinar is really just to showcase the latest version. I think it is a kind of key pillar of ours too, that with this new version, we are super confident in the workflows and the technology. We kind of want to let the product speak for itself. And so I do have a deck. It's very short. It's maybe 4 slides talking through our perspective, some of the new features of our newest version, but also, again, just want to jump into the demo kind of as quickly as possible. So once again, really appreciate everyone joining. This video is being recorded. We should have maybe Q&A or chat up and running so that if people want to ask questions, you can. And then I'll have Seth probably watching the chat throughout. And obviously, feel free to email us afterwards as well. The timeline here, by the way, is that we have released the trials of our newest version. And so right now we have, I'd say, about 40 organizations whose researchers are testing out the product, giving us all sorts of feedback, like finding bugs and issues, requesting new features, et cetera. Within about 2 weeks, we plan to go live with new capabilities, including both modules, narrative review module and systematic review module. That said, let's just jump right into the deck. And again, I've got Seth as a panelist. So Seth, let me know if something's wrong with my audio or if you can't see my screen or something like that. So let's jump into this. Everyone knows, I think by now probably, that MORA stands for Mother of All Research Assistants. I'm just reading this off my separate screen here. I think, as we mentioned probably in some of our prior webinars, we sort of always start from the question of, given this space, the industry of AI tools for literature reviews, how do we make ours most usable and most accessible for not, let's say, hobbyist researchers or groups that are trying to get a scan of the literature on a topic, but rather full-time professional academic researchers. What we have discovered fairly recently, came to this realization, is that the actual process of finding, organizing, file managing, sharing, reviewing, synthesizing papers, that process can be improved significantly, but it cannot be skipped. Full transparency, kind of full disclosure. Our perspective on the space is that a lot of different products have tried to over automate that process. And therefore, we feel that there are some products out there like our prior versions that are really good at giving a quick scan of the empirical research on a topic. But when it comes to actually ripping through papers and going through a very detailed literature review or systematic review, we haven't to date really harnessed some of the new technologies coming out to help with that process. So what we're releasing in the coming days is, rather than calling it just kind of an AI literature review tool, I think of it more like a workspace. This is a way to find and organize papers and share papers and empirical findings with other researchers. It is much more of a project management tool than it is kind of a question and answer engine. We are especially focused on helping users with literature reviews that are generally large. These are all kind of ROI metrics. The larger and more comprehensive the literature review you're working on, the better ROI you'll get out of a site like Mora in this case. Helping with literature reviews that are particularly methodical. So literature reviews are, as everyone knows, as much an art as a science, but we're trying to really help with the science part of that. So for instance, how do you go about screening? How do you go about actually ensuring you have good coverage over a topic? How do you make literature reviews a little bit less judgmental, better documented, et cetera? So large, methodical, and of course, collaborative. We really, just from a business strategy perspective, we really want to kind of create the most value with and work mostly with research teams, folks that are maybe have a team of 2 or 10 or 20 researchers that are sharing responsibilities between them on literature reviews. So large, methodical, and collaborative reviews are most appropriate. As you'll see in the demo, this is our new workflow. It is no longer a plugin, again, a research question, get a long summary AI report in response. Instead, users are themselves going through the process, and I hope, have some productivity tools and enablement features that can help them along the way. So what's new in this product? Sort of everything. For those that were, big time users of our version 2, as we called it, this one, I guess we're sort of calling version 3. We kind of want to do away with the versioning. We're really going to build on top of this interface. But for those that worked a lot in V2, you'll notice the UX, the user experience, is completely different. Specifically, collaboration was actually a feature we didn't offer previously. And now I'd like to think we make collaboration very, very easy. There is a brand new search engine. We got a lot of feedback in the past about our search results basically not being good enough. There not being enough filters on our search engine. And so what we've done is radically simplify our search engine, make it very fast, and incorporate all sorts of filters. And so that should be helpful. Systematic review workflows is something I'll touch on today. It'll be in our go live release, but still it's a work in progress. But we feel like it's a very intuitive extension of the workflow we've built here. Zotero integration came up in almost every kind of user conversation we had. And so I'll show you, we've made it very simple to specifically grab your API key in Zotero and plug it into Mora and import all your citations and PDFs. So that is new and I hope very accessible and easy to use. And then finally, there's actually a long list of others, but the other one I want to highlight, which is really exciting, is help with full text reviews. Specifically, you've got your articles, you've got the full text PDFs, and you can actually annotate, save down highlights to make them structured, interactive. You can run queries over your annotations. You can cluster them. You can export them to other writing tools, etc. So these are some of the new features and maybe some of the ones I'm most excited about. And then finally, last major slide here is that I think, again, from a business strategy perspective, question of who is right for Mora versus who is right for maybe some other research tools in this space or some other more traditional research tools. Answer to that question, if you're trying to figure out if maybe you or your network or team or stakeholders are right for Mora. The first one, and I think the most straightforward and easy one, is if you are reading through full text articles as part of your research, I'd like to think you're a good candidate for Mora. If you, for instance, are not, and maybe just on a monthly basis, you need to get a quick scan of the literature on a topic, there are other tools that do that really well. So that probably wouldn't be, at least at the moment, in our wheelhouse. So once again, that's why I mentioned these are for professional, academic, and scientific researchers. If you're reading full text reviews, you should probably, you can get some value out of more, I hope. Secondly, almost by extension, if you use reference managers, probably a good indication that Mora could be a helpful tool. File managing a long list of papers is kind of a beastly task. And so that is a major part of Mora. Obviously, with the Zotero integration, we actually integrate with some reference managers, but then we can sort of carry those tasks further downstream in the research process. If you collaborate with a team, that's a really good indication. And then finally, you know, interestingly, I've got an op-ed going out shortly about how literature reviews are treated in different disciplines. But let me summarize this by saying if literature reviews are a checkbox exercise for you as a researcher in your publication, then again, a scan of the research could be helpful. If literature reviews are used in your publication, in your presentations as a formal research method, such as via systematic review, literature reviews are a big part of your methodology. Without a doubt, a tool like Mora could be super helpful. And that is all I wanted to cover. So I want to get right into the demo and just show the product. But I think, as everyone probably knows, this is the team. Our newest member is here as well. You've got myself, Seth Watson, who's, again, the other panelist, Ife Zhu, who's listening in, and Bilal Mahmood is a newest team member. He's been with us for about a couple months now. He's an awesome engineer, head of AI ML at Mora. And so we've got a team of 4 and then a whole bunch of contractors that help us as well. But this is the core team. Really appreciate everyone's time and always the feedback we're getting on the product. That said, really sorry, I'm going to bounce around to different tabs here. Let me pull up the product, and I will try to, make sure it's not kind of a script I'm talking through. I'll talk through in really plain language and very transparently the product, what we're still working on, and what I think is, most useful in terms of context here. Right now I'm using Seth's profile just for demo purposes. I am going to come back to these as a couple examples. We'll actually create a new review, but I'll be able to show you a little bit about the systematic review capabilities we're building. Let's just start with really simple stuff, kind of housekeeping. One is that there is now a brand new profile section. You can add a picture, you can update your name, institution, bio, etc. This is for both within your organization, outside your organizations, researchers that add you to your review. You've at least got some kind of profile there. Integrations, at the moment, we highlight 2 here, even though there are more on the site. The Zotero integration, once again, I won't showcase it here in order to not bounce back and forth between applications, but pretty simple. You go to your Zotero, you grab your private API key from the security section of your settings. We'll put out a video on this specifically. And then you plug it in here, and you can import all of your papers and citations within your review. As you'll see, finally, libkey integration is 10 times easier to use now than it was before. All you really have to do is search for your organization. This is, maybe I'll start with kind of my alma mater here, American University. GW is what I was using before. That's where I teach, but I'll save changes. And then it'll be once you actually go to use that libkey integration when you have to incorporate your library sign-on. Nonetheless, those are your integrations. Pretty straightforward. We're going to create a new review, and I'm going to bounce back and forth just because I've got the kind of parameters of the review set up to save time. As you see here, at the moment, systematic reviews is grayed out. I'll show you an example, but when we go live, that'll be a module that you can choose as well. Here, we're going to start from actually the same starting point we had in our prior version. I'm going to do a review title, and then I'm going to do a description. Just for kind of simplicity, I'll use a very simple description, but here's where I hope people really post their scope of work, what they're trying to accomplish with the review, add a good amount of detail, because as you'll see, that gets incorporated into pretty much every step in the workflow, in the Mora workflow. But for now, we've got create review. One other mention I just want to kind of make here is I really hope what comes across in terms of the kind of look and feel of the product is that We certainly heard a lot about, and we're concerned ourselves about the quote, harmful to learning problem. And the way we've tried to address that head on is once again, turning this from a question and answer engine to a workflow tool. That's almost kind of a way to address that problem. The other is doing our best to incorporate instructional guidance throughout the products. In this case, when I look at, for instance, a description of narrative reviews, I know even as a somewhat experienced researcher in the field of economics, the type of review you select for a literature review really was not something that was on my radar. And so I bring that up just to say that I hope the type of instructional guidance we plan to incorporate throughout the workflow is going to be helpful not only for students trying to figure out or junior researchers trying to figure out how to go through a literature review, but also for experienced researchers, research professors and whatnot. And there's a lot of really cool meta scientific data metrics we can add in there as well. Nonetheless, let's create a review. We've got our workflow. Obviously, or as you can see here, every step is grayed out until you actually add papers for kind of obvious reasons. And so we're going to go ahead and just want to make sure I cover everything I want to cover here. Let's briefly show you collaboration, which is incredibly simple, pretty straightforward. I'm going to add Ife as an editor. You can do view only, edit only, send invite. As you can imagine, she gets an email. If you're a Mora user already, you're automatically added to the review. If you're not, you're prompted to sign up for the site. And so you can add, a significant amount of collaborators here. Very, very simple to use, I would like to think. Settings is where you can update title and description, delete your review if you want, or here's where you can use your review ID if needed. Let's go back to the dashboard. We'll start a review. Big changes here. I'll just tell you, kind of transparently, previously we had PDF imports. Now we've got a number of different file types, and this really stems from a lot of feedback and requests we got, especially from folks in the, let's say, medical research space, health sciences librarians, etc. So you can indeed import PDFs. Maybe I'll start with that and ignore some of the kind of unneeded parts here. Whoops. Okay, I selected one there. I meant to select a few. Let's just select a few others. Okay. So those PDFs are being, you've got data being extracted from those PDF files, obviously. As I'll show in a second, and I'll actually just go to PubMed, you can import, MBIB files. You can export from EndNote, RAS files, import into the site. You can also, here's where you've got your Zotero integration. Any kind of papers I've got in Zotero, they show up as sections as well, but I can import those here, or you can manually enter papers if you need to. I'm going to show just really briefly how this might work in terms of the PubMed export and import. It is obviously super clear. I'm just going to plug in some kind of keyword search. Let's just pick a couple here. I am going to export these as NBIB files. You can also just do the full list of search results if you want, but it takes a little bit longer, so that's why I'm not doing that. And then we can go ahead and grab that NBIB file from downloaded and import them here. So hopefully very clear, but that is, especially for systematic reviews, something that's incredibly important, importing those citation files. So those are complete. We'll see those already show up in our library, which I'll get back to in a second. Some of this is going to be familiar territory. And then the updated search engine, there's really not a huge amount to cover here because I'd like to think it's a very intuitive, easy to use search engine. Once again, you've got 8 filters. Previously, we had, I think, maybe 1 or 2. You can enter in a search query if you'd like, and the site updates with search results pretty quickly. The other thing you can do is to use our little brain icon here, which, more or less pumps out, let's call it an optimized search query based on our corpus of papers. And you can save down results from here. So per usual, we've got the Semantic Scholar corpus running on the back end here. Unlike in the past, we've just about doubled the number of papers in our corpus. So it's over 200 million, fully cross-disciplinary. However, I'll reiterate, for very serious literature reviews, the idea is that this search engine should be used in conjunction with importing papers from other sources. And so specifically when I'm doing reviews, I actually, believe it or not, start with other search engines like PubMed, import those papers. I use this more or less as a way to double check and make sure I've got all the paper, I haven't missed any papers, in short. Of course, you've got maybe a student that wants to do a very quick glance at search results. They can jump straight to the search engine if they'd like. We can go into save mode. We can save those down. And then once again, what you have is a pretty well-organized library. All of the papers you've imported via PDF or zip file, all the papers you've imported as citations via maybe MBIB, everything you've added from your search results. And a big update here is that there are a number of, let's call them dynamic fields, priority levels. So you can go in here and mark these as high, medium, low priority. Indeed, for narrative reviews, I think a lot of people will primarily screen through the library tab. Some people will, at least. You can tag these if you want, just by checking them off. You can tag multiple at once, or you can assign and make notes here. The reason I'm not doing it is to show the library is really connected to every tab on this in this workflow. And so let me jump into screening and just show you how changes you make in the screening tab get updated automatically in your library tab. And again, a lot of talking here, really sorry. I'm just going to continue to run through this functionality really quickly. I'd love to leave maybe 15, 20 minutes for any questions that crop up, or maybe Seth, if you have something to add in terms of commentary, that'd be great as well. Let's start with our screening tab now. So we've added our papers. We can now more or less kind of rifle through them and do a number of things. First one we can do is review the metadata very quickly, indicate whether a paper is high, medium, low priority. We can add tags. In this case, let's pretend there's a number of different target variables. You're trying to find the effects of telemedicine, or maybe remote doctor visits versus in-person ones. Maybe there's a number of different target variables, and in this case, we'll say the target variables are cardiac metrics. I don't, it's not my field, but nonetheless, we'll use cardiac metrics versus maybe follow-up visits. You can tag papers any way you'd like. Here, we can easily assign different users. So I'll assign Ife to this document to review it. Maybe we can make a note such as especially relevant for non-US populations or something like that. So a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to use the screening tab. Among the kind of actual fields that are in here, what I maybe like most about the screening tab is that it ensures I don't lose any papers. I know that sounds really basic, but when I'm doing an off-the-cuff review, I might be, for instance, finding a paper and then finding kind of its references that are really great. I open up those references in like Microsoft Edge or something as PDFs, and then time passes, I got to restart my computer, I lose them. Same thing with even saving them down to your file system. They end up just in very kind of complicated fashion, sitting there in your files looking a lot like this. You sort of lose track of what is what. And importantly, you're not kind of providing assurance to yourself or to your teammates that you're actually prompted to go back in and review those. Here, what I'm getting at is when a paper is added, you are undoubtedly prompted to review that. Otherwise, it shows up as an unscreened paper. So you can see I've updated this one. Let's jump to another one where we have, for instance, full text. Let's mark that one as high. Let's just use an example tag. I'm going to maybe just assign it to myself. Let's do Seth. And then notes would be, again, I'll just do example note. And importantly, save and next. And what we'll see is that those show up as updated in our library tab. So that's the theme throughout. I can also, again, update here, and it'll show up in our screening tab. But that is kind of our starting point. So that's screening. I know it's really helpful for me kind of rifling through each one by one. I usually spend about 60 seconds on each paper going through the screening process. And then let me just kind of keep moving here through the workflow. At the moment, we're updating these manually, by the way. I do view it as fairly helpful to mark these as maybe not started or in progress. When you exit your review and jump back in, you will generally be prompted to go back into the section where you exited the site on. We've finished screening. Let's say we've marked, 10% of our papers as high priority. Maybe a big chunk of them are medium priority. That is, perhaps you'll cite them in your kind of deliverable or in your research paper as as part of a broader conclusion, a positive effect or negative effect or something like that. But for the ones where we're going to do actual full text article reviews, which I view as the high priority ones, that's where we want to jump into reading and annotation. In some cases, we don't have the PDF attached, and in screening, you are prompted to open that document and import it yourself. Super important to align with copyrights. It's not text and data mining. It is users grabbing those papers themselves, maybe with libkey or another process, and importing them directly. My recommendation is do those for full text article reviews. Jump into reading and annotation. And this is, in my view, a really, really cool feature, is that you are rifling through your PDF documents. I usually try to get, we try to make this reading pane large enough that you can actually, do a significant review within this tab. But I try to hide kind of everything I can, make this very large. Here is where, as I move between papers, I can see the key metadata, relevant summary, study design, data type, key findings, and then the notes I made. And I am, again, pouring through this paper, and the key feature is, let's say I find an empirical result that's really interesting that didn't show up in our overarching metadata. I can actually annotate that. I can add a note like use in section XYZ. Maybe I can add a tag if I want to, or you don't have to do either of these. These are optional. And then I will save that down as a structured annotation. And what's really exciting is, as you can imagine, you can query those. You can, in the next tab, copy them, paste them elsewhere, and you'll get the, Per Huang et al. 2023, and then the quote. So they're very easy to pick up and use. And then additionally, just as I'm pouring through a paper, if I find an annotation that's really interesting, I can click on it. It'll show me exactly where that result is. And so that's a big feature here. Again, let's call them interactive, structured annotation highlights in your full text article reviews. So you can go through your different documents and perform that kind of those updates. And then the final tab, and it feels strange not pausing for questions, but I know it's kind of, since it's a webinar format, I'll wait until the end. Let's just to show you how this kind of works, you can see the progress bar updated. Final tab is synthesize. Now, full disclosure, synthesize is really where we would love the most amount of feedback. So we're at the stage now where, at this stage of the site, you've got your papers, you've got the key paper metadata associated with each. That's all, able to be queried. You have your annotations where you did full text reviews. So when I save down, say, 40 papers and screen 40 papers, I'm typically doing full text article reviews for between 5 and 10. And then for each of those, I have around 10 annotations. So I end up with a pretty large volume of annotations, say 50 to 75, something like that. But here is where you can, again, copy and paste those if you'd like, and where you can actually bring these all together. Our structure right now is that you can check off whichever papers you'd like, you can check off whichever annotations you'd like, and you can cluster them. So I'll create a new finding. The idea here being, maybe you select all of the annotations or papers whose overarching conclusions are positive effects, or let's say negative effects of remote appointments on follow-up appointments or something like that. And actually, a quick glance at the literature would tell me that should be positive when I was just going over this example. But you can put it in the description. Let's just put a test for now. And the point is, you can save these all down together. So now you can copy the entire finding and the total cluster of papers and annotations together. You can delete it if you want. You can update it. And then you can go in and do the same with maybe some other annotations. So that is one way in which we've decided to really take advantage of this synthesize tab. Is just pretty simple, cataloging all of your papers and annotations and notes, and then giving you the ability to cluster them. Kind of the next step in the process is to jump into your outline section. And within outline is where you can actually, let's call it, architect your paper. So you can go into your section, you can maybe come up with, you can say something like key methodologies. And then here you can actually incorporate the findings that you've just laid out. This is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish, is that everything sort of connects. The idea being, actually, once you get into your synthesize, you realize there's some additional literature you should add. You head right back to that add literature tab and rescreen papers if needed. But here, what I'm going to do is let's say add a finding, we can incorporate that. We get a preliminary references list. You can also add papers here as well, add annotations. Once again, the idea being you can sort of architect your whole paper in this outline section. Even if you want, incorporate comments from others in some, maybe your empirical findings of the model that you might run separately. So I'd like to think people can be very flexible with this type of functionality. But again, really looking for feedback here. We are coming up with a lot more kind of LLM-based features here, coming up with really interesting ways to pull together citations. If anyone has comments, ideas, put them in the chat or hit us up afterwards, because it's a good problem to have. A lot of awesome data that users have put together themselves, super detailed, personalized. Now what to do with it is kind of the question to answer. Finally, export was frankly kind of a blatant gap in our prior version. We didn't have significant export capabilities. Now you can export basically everything. So you can put it all into a zip file. You can export your library as a CSV, which obviously just exports this entire table. And then you can export findings, annotations, put all of your full text articles in one file, etc. So that is kind of the entire workflow at the moment. And then, I think every single feature, every capability we build going forward will certainly work off of this foundation. And then the very last aspect of this I just want to cover briefly is a preliminary glance at the systematic reviews, which once again will be part of our go live version. Uh, for better or worse, we feel we can actually just tack on some key features and capabilities to that workflow, which we call a narrative review workflow. It's actually more like a semi-systematic review workflow. But the point is, systematic reviews, we're tacking on some key elements. Those include inclusion-exclusion criteria. So questionnaires that are, for instance, starting with maybe the Pico elements, Pico framework, including custom criteria. Same way you might add custom fields to a library in some tools. Custom criteria, which is then incorporated into and addressed in the screening tab and in other parts of the site. We are putting together a search strategy kind of engine here. This is not for the purpose of conducting your entire search on Mora. Instead, it's for the purpose of helping to support with coming up with the kind of optimal queries in databases based on your title and description of your review, and you can iterate on that. Ad literature looks very similar, albeit no search engine. For a number of reasons, we've decided we should not include a search engine in the ad literature tab of systematic reviews. There's just kind of, frankly, no place for it at the moment. Screening looks very similar. Though these insights will be data extractions based on inclusion-exclusion criteria. Risk of bias assessments is still a work in progress. Most of what we're doing right now is trying to determine which risk of bias assessments to actually include, and would love feedback on that. At the moment, synthesize looks very similar as well, and of course you can export. Finally, this is just a mock-up, but the Prisma workflow is increasingly something we are trying to make not a deliverable you put together at the end of a review or something like that, but a database that's automatically updated as you go through your review. And so you can see you've got the key fields here that we plan to have included, total records, what's weeded out based on deduplications, what's excluded in your inclusion-exclusion decisions, what's included in full text review, etc. So very similar functionality, but with some added bells and whistles and pretty important foundational capabilities here. You also have a Prisma checklist. We're trying to figure out how to incorporate this, but that is currently where we're at. A lot of different features in the backlog. We're happy to talk through those, but that is everything we wanted to cover in the demo. So what we'd love from everyone just I guess we got 25 minutes. I'm sure people might send us emails afterwards, but if anyone has feature requests or things they think, hey, it would be amazing if you had this, questions, concerns, or immediate reactions to the workflow, please let me know. And then Seth, I'll ask you first, anything I missed from that overview and demo?
I don't think so. I think you covered most of everything. I think the systematic reviews and the in synthesize of narrative reviews is kind of where I'm really looking forward to, I mean, reaching out to my librarian friends and continue to iterate on it. Those are the two big spots that I want to improve significantly over the next, say, like 2 weeks before release. Um, but yeah, that's the only thing that I would call out.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Yeah, Seth and Bilal in particular, Ife as well, working extremely hard to get ready for that release. If anyone has questions about, um, what the onboarding setup will be, what the pricing will be, what type of functionality is included in different licenses, please let me know. But I think that pretty much covers everything. And so if anyone has questions, again, john@mora.io is the best way to reach me. And really, really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
John, do you want to stay on and just I'll just check the webinar chat and just see if anyone posts anything. Um,
Yeah, you know what? Let's do this, Seth, just because we're recording this. Let's jump off. And then whoever maybe is on the YouTube live stream, we will just send out a note afterwards if there are questions.
okay,
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
thank you.